Is the 23rd of November, and today we are discussing the proposal for the issue configure job token scope at group level. Just to provide a context that we enabled this capability at project level, that we provide users with this option to secure their CI job token, and we want to move this level up to at group level so that like when organizations which work with groups have a lot of projects under groups or subgroups, it would be very tedious for them to go around and like individually change the settings for each one of them. So something that is maybe at the root level is what we're exploring. All right. Then moving on to our questions. Yeah, Fabio, what are your views with how the conversation has evolved?
Yeah, sorry. I was just double checking where we were at with the comments on the issue.
Okay. So the latest proposal is adding alerts that communicate to user if any change has been. So let's say if we are going with making it a root level feature, then what would happen at project level, and where it is that we should notify users that something has been enforced at root level, and this is the impact that it would have on your configurations for this project.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have like a strong opinion on that. Like my thoughts are like, do we need to do that? Like, I know I'm assuming that if now suddenly we want to dog food this feature, and if we want to limit the CI job token scope, we would have a maintainer that decides to enable this for GitLab org top level group will first communicate with everybody, says like, we are going to enable this this day, so if you're gonna get any errors related to permission, it might be related to this. Like, this is I see how I see this working. But in order to alert for a specific project to say that suddenly something has changed in the permission, I'm wondering how we could implement something like that, because what we are changing is with the CI job token scope is we're adding another filter in our permission policies. So an action that was allowed suddenly becomes disallowed, but it's not like a check that we perform after the permission policy. So where we could say it failed because of this reason. In order to understand why it failed, like, in order to debug why it failed, we will need to debug the policy, the permission policy, and then to understand which rule actually failed. In that case, we will figure out, okay, failed because of the CI job token scope, decide to disallow this action. But it's not, we would not be able to easily provide like an error message to say, oh, failed because of this reason, unless we hook into our permission policy. I'm trying to figure out like how we could implement something like that, because it will look like the user is not a member of that project when the CI job token is not allowed to access the target project. And this is why they're getting either 401 unauthorized, or they might get forbidden depending on the endpoint. But it looks like you're not a member, or you don't have either like enough permission to perform this action, or you're not a member of that project. So it will look more like that. Yeah, because the filtering of the CI job token scope happens before even we run other permission checks, like, can I actually read a repository? It will be more like, if you if you're trying to access a project that is not in the scope, we don't even go further to check whether you actually have that permission. So that basically forbid everything, like you are not a member of that project.
So let's say if I'm in a project where my configuration is trying to access a token for a project which is not authorized. So would the pipeline not be created or would it fail?
Well, it depends what we're trying to do with the CI job token. If you're trying to use the CI job token to trigger a pipeline, you will get like probably a 404 errors that that project doesn't even exist. The project where you want to run the pipeline doesn't exist. Um, you might get something like that. Or if you're trying to use CI job token to download a package, you might get the same error where say that project you're trying to download the package from doesn't exist. So you might return 404. But in reality, that project exists, you just don't have access through the CI job token.
Okay, so that means that the number of use cases, like in ways in which the projects would be affected, it's very wide. So it's not that there'd be just one kind of error for which we can provide an alert. The number of cases could be very wide depending on what we are trying to use the CI job token for in the configuration.
Yes, yes. And also the error would be different depending on what and how the endpoint treats when you don't have permission to perform that action. Some endpoints may return 404, some returns may return 401 unauthorized, some other endpoints return 403 forbidden. So that depends on how the endpoint is configured, but basically it's when the permission, when you don't have permission, we raise an exception that is kind of returned that way. So that will be an equivalent as you are not a member of that project. So it will be, that's why it's difficult to distinguish. You don't have access to this because you're not member or because you, the CI job token is configured differently. In our troubleshooting guide about the CI job token, we do list different error messages because each endpoint might treat it differently. So let's see if I find that. I think there is some kind of hack we could do to catch that. But I'm wondering whether we want to go on that route and whether it is needed, first of all. That's my first question is like, do we need to tell the user you don't have access because somebody else above like a project root group level decides to lock access to this? Yeah,
So
thank you, Marcel. So yeah, if you go into the troubleshooting section, there is 3 different examples. Actually, this different 3 different examples of return of 404. But you can see the error is different because each endpoint will return a different error messages. So you will get like an error like this.
okay, so I have a take on this. So right now, the proposal that I shared was keeping in mind Sasha and Devon. I've also mentioned that, but it seems like if a root level change, if a root level policy would be implemented, it would be more like the organization wants to function this way. And the persona that should be associated with this is very different. So I shouldn't be focusing on Sasha, let's say, because this has more to do with the admins and at the most the DevOps engineer. That means we don't have to let the developers know what's going on, but in fact, it's something that has been decided for the organization that these are the projects that should be accessed and these are the ones, and the rest should not be, and that's it.
Yes, yes. So it's on a related topic. I think there is some. I need to find out. There's like another issue where we currently are not able to add projects to the CI job token scope unless we enable it first. so this is kind of a UX we might need to fix. That might be kind of a way to help users to deal with enabling the CI job token scope, because as soon as you enable it, you start blocking any request outside the project. And then you can add the projects to the scope, so then those requests will be allowed. But there is like a period that you first need to enable, then that might start blocking pipeline some jobs, and that you can get like pipeline failures. And then as you start adding the projects, things could kind of start succeeding again. So we might need to have a way of adding things to the projects to the job token scope without enabling it. So then once everything is configured, then you can say, okay, let's enable now, and then everything should work without affecting any pipelines.
I didn't get it. Can you repeat the last part? So how can we?
So in order to configure today the CI job token scope, is like you first need to enable it,
right,
in the project settings, and that by default will restrict access of to the CI job token to anything outside the current project. So if you have a running pipeline that was configured to use CI job token to download the package from somewhere else, and the moment you enable the CI job token scope, that will block any request to another project. So some running pipeline might fail because of that, because there is no way of enabling of adding a project before enabling the CI job token scope. So ideally, we would like to have, like, if I were like a group owner, or a maintainer that I would like to administrate this CI job token, I will first collect all the requirements, understand where the CI job token is used, what it's used for, and then say, okay, it's used to access this project, this other project, this other project. I add them all to the scope and then enable the scope. So then all the permissions are configured, and the CI job token has already access to everything it needs and nothing else. But today we have this kind of UX problem where you first need to enable, and then you need to configure it. You might have like failing pipelines there. So I'm wondering, by improving this UX, then we would have we could help maintainers of CI configuration in these scenarios to use a different strategy that is not blocker, or like at least not as disruptive, to say things start to fail first before we go and fix them. And that might be a way of not dealing with specific error messages. I'm wondering about that.
So basically, the main thing is that the interface for adding projects is hidden, right? And so if we just keep it always visible, that seems to be a pretty simple solution, assuming we can flip it back and forth and just leave it visible. It sounds like a good, and I didn't even think of it until you mentioned it right now. It's like, oh yeah, because it's a firewall that you're locking down everything and you're poking holes, but you actually want to define those holes before you drop it down. So it makes a lot of sense.
So the concern, the use case that we're talking through is that if I'm a group admin, I'm still trying to wrap my head a little bit around the CI job token. I enable this feature and I say, this is enabled now for my group and all of my projects within it. I'm going to give global access to all of the projects within the group so that they can access each other with this CI job token, and it's secure. So it's kind of has that limited life. But then if other stuff wants to call into my project, I need to specifically allow it. What we want to then alert is that someone calling from that other project that maybe previously had access, now they understand why their pipeline is failing, because they don't have a token that can access this project or projects within this group. That's the problem we're trying to solve. It's just to make sure I crack everything here. Okay.
Yeah. And the use case.
So have we handled that? I mean, we have that problem today at the project level because we've enabled this at the project level. Do we have alerting for this at the project level? Do we know this is a problem at the project level today? Or are we trying to solve a problem that doesn't actually exist?
So today it's disabled by default at project level. So that means that the CI job token has the same permission as the user impersonating the CI job token. So there is no restriction in that case. So, but we have seen that I don't know like how many top level groups we have. I think I pulled some information there before, but like we have
Yeah,
about
we had
like
a
400
like 93% or 97% were covered by one case here.
Yeah, so and we have like about 490 configured links between projects, and I don't know this how many customers like or like a top level organization that will be equivalent to, but basically we have some organizations that have started to enable it, and yeah, so they start to configure it. I'm assuming that as you configure it, you realize that you run a pipeline and the job fails and you realize, oh, actually I forgot to add this project to the scope, so that you didn't go and add the project, rerun the pipeline, now everything passes. But if we do the same thing, like the same UX at root level, root group level, it might have an even higher impact, both on positive and negative, because if we can't allow administrator, group level administrator to configure upfront the CI job token, then once you enable it, then the CI job token can only access any project within that group. But if something is configured to allow to access something external, it won't happen. So the job basically will fail. So I think we have this kind of as a blocker to solve both at project level and root namespace level.
And could it be as simple as the job fails? You're trying to call it, you're trying to trigger a pipeline outside of your project, and you see that the job that is doing that fails. A message as simple as CI job token may be restricted, check with project owner. And we don't have to surface the exact reason that you don't have the access. We can give you a directional reason and see if that solves for now.
Yeah, and that is what I was saying. Like we might need to hook into our permission model. There's several rules.
Well, even if we
that
don't,
fail.
if we don't hook the permission model and just say there's a lot of reasons a job could fail. Here's one of them, and give you a very short list or link you to documentation that could take you down that path of, any number of things could have failed. One of them could be that you're just not allowed because they've enabled the restricted CI job tokens.
Yeah, and this is like this depends on how each endpoint surface permission errors. Because what we are doing with the CI job token scope, it's very it's a very low level. Then like we raise like you don't have permission to perform this action. It's as generic as this. Then each endpoint can say you don't have permission, like they can display a specific error message with some link to documentation, or some other cases could be just as vague as generic. And so what we'll need is to either raise a more specific error message or hook into our permission policy to say, okay, this specific rule failed, and maybe we can raise a slightly different error or something like that.
I think we could iterate to that point, but before we go through all of that work, can we just stop way before that and say it could be permissions, it could be that GitLab CI YAML file is like not going to work, it could be any number of reasons you cannot trigger that other pipeline. Here's a documentation page that has some of the things, and that could just point you at, hey, you might not have permissions, go talk to that project maintainer or owner about enabling a CI job token. That could be the problem. Kind of put that onus back onto the user to do the troubleshooting. If it's really only 3% of cases that we think are, or 3% of the known projects that are going to have a problem like this where they would benefit from surfacing the error, I don't think that we gain a lot by investing the time to hook the permission model and try to surface a very descriptive error to them. I think we're better off with investing a little bit of time in documentation, saying, hey, there's a lot of reasons the pipelines fail. Here's a troubleshooting guide. I don't know. Am
Yeah,
I
I'm
way
wondering
off?
where that error. I was just wondering where that error would be surfaced.
Yeah, this is basically why our first iteration was, let's list some examples of why or how this can fail, and we put in our CI job token troubleshooting guide, so at least people can search for that error, find that there is a reason why this might fail. And that was our first iteration, but the next iteration might be to refine error messages in our API endpoints, but that can be it happened at a different level of abstraction than what happens, what we are imagining. So to do that, it means that every pipeline and every API endpoint will return a more specific error. And today, like packages might return a specific error message, and when using, not necessarily when using CI job token, but when you don't have permission to do an action, or API endpoints for pipeline triggering could return a slightly different message. And we might need to be a little bit more specific in all of these endpoints where CI job token is used to say, to kind of specify like a more readable or more descriptive message, indicating that CI job token scope can be one of the reasons.
So I'm just like wondering, for the 3 examples in the doc, for example, which part of these would we be able to adjust, for example? Because like if we're just returning an error code 404, like it's going to be hard to tweak that, isn't it? Or are we, like in the second one, we have error 404 not found. Like that's kind of a standard thing. Like, are we able to edit that not found and then add a long message after that?
I think we are able to do it. Yeah, I think we are able to add like more specific error message. Yeah, we might need to be able to do this only for specific endpoints where CI job token is allowed. There are not many. You know, the good thing is that CI job token is actually very limited in the number of endpoints you can use that. But yeah, that could be one of the things we could do. Like,
All right, so we're running out of time. Are we at a point where we've made progress on answering the questions we wanted to answer? Do we need to schedule another session or take this async to continue the discussion? What do you think, Vitika?
I'm trying very hard to process. So I think we should summarize this and take it async, because I still don't have a very conclusive answer to what should be the next step.
Okay.
with regarding to, aside from how we want to surface the error, how specifically we want that to be, does it make sense to, and after we fix the UX, where we allow the CI job token to be first configured before we enable it, does it make sense, the proposal of start with the root level settings rather than using group level, where it might have like inheritance complexities?
I think it does. Just one question, that if we are going to reverse the workflow, not reverse, I mean, if we are going to go with implementing this method in the workflow, should that not also reflect on the project side?
You mean about like allowing
Configuring
the
first
token?
and enabling.
Yes, yeah. I think it should be something that should be applied to both.
Okay. So we would, since that one is already in place, we can start off working on this with a different workflow and then create an issue to change the other one. That
Yes,
sounds
we can do
fine.
that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, then this is one thing we can explore.
Sounds good.
All right.
I have one
So
quick question.
Yeah.
It was a bit confusing to me how the top level, the group level, if you enable it and you also have things enabled at the project level, how those would interact. So like if you turn it on at the group level, saying only projects within this group can talk to each other in a sense, and then in the project settings, you then specify a project outside of the group. Like what would the precedence be?
Yeah, I think and just my suggestion was that to avoid like breaking something instantly or creating any disruption, um, we should not, we should not take away the existing connections with the other projects, but just enforce the new ones. Like something that has been added manually to the list should stay there. But on top of that, it should get access to everything else in the project. We should add to the list, not remove anything from the list, is what I mean. What do you think, Fabio?
Yeah, I haven't. This is what I put in the table. Let me click here. And so there's different scenarios there.
I think you've answered it there. Yeah, I didn't see that table.
Yeah, well,
Thanks,
but
Fabio.
it's one table I put there together, but I don't have an answer to everything. So I think we need to kind of explore like what are like pros and cons. But basically, it's like if at project level, a group level, you can enable it, and by default, that will give access to all the projects within the same top level group. So that means, yeah, in the case of GitLab org, any project under GitLab org can access any other projects within GitLab org, as long as the user has access to it. But then if GitLab org/GitLab would specify an external project that needs to access, we still kind of, we basically create like a sum of all the scope and allow that to the project to specify something outside. And I think we need to kind of balance what is like a pros and cons in this. Like it's what a top level kind of organization from compliance perspective or whatever, or security permission perspective would want, or they would want to instead to configure everything at top level to be more secure and not allow projects to specify their own scope. I'm not sure. I think this is something we will need to maybe get feedback from users, or I don't have an answer to that.
We might end up in a place where we just don't allow you to create sticky situations in the UI, other than specifically allowing a project to allow access from other projects outside the group. Maybe we start in a really simple way if you can't get yourself into a weird security bind where things conflict, or we're very explicit about when you add these things, it cascades to the projects, or vice versa.
Mm.
I'll spend some time noodling on this while I'm trying to digest turkey this week, and put some thoughts back in on Friday, or on next Monday rather, and we'll be on Friday. Cool. Okay. This is really helpful in just me trying to get my brain around what the CI job token does and how like you enable it and this. So thank you for this 30 minutes for me. I appreciate it. I have to drop off and go drop the kiddo off at school. But I did want to say, Marcel, I think this is the very first call we've actually been on together.
It's been 2 years. I see your name all the time. And when I saw you show up in the video, I was like, oh my God, finally, it's happened.
So it happens when we're halfway across the globe from each other, although Vitika and I are on calls all the time. So I really probably shouldn't use that as an excuse. All right. Thank you all so much. I got to drop. Appreciate the time.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Sure.
Thanks.